But yeah, my area is about the switched on culture, how we use technology. And I work with lots of organisations, with individuals and with managers too sometimes, to look at some of the impacts of those. And what really interests me is building up this kind of digital resilience, because technology has really taken off. I'm probably much older than lots of you here, but I can remember the day when I didn't actually have a smartphone or any kind of technology at all. I remember I worked in London some 20 years ago now, and I had a kind of brick as a mobile phone, and it really wasn't that great. And lots of people, you know, I couldn't get email on there or anything like that. I could just probably take calls and send the odd dodgy message, that kind of thing. But since then, and since around 2006 through to 2012 and onwards, phones have become much more part of our lives. They've actually become a feature, almost an appendage to us. So we hold our phone like it's an extra piece of us, and it's very hard to let go. And I'm sure lots of you can recognize some of those feelings. So technology, though, it has some huge benefits, and I'm really keen on technology. And I see it as an enabler. It allowed me, when my daughter was young, to come back to work from home. It's very flexible. I could work at different times. I could make lots of connections with other people. And we've seen through COVID, haven't we, just how important it's been for us to carry on studying and working and teaching and doing all the things that we want to do. It offers a great deal of flexibility, and it does enable us to talk, you know, internationally. I've been to conferences and spoken to people all around the world during this last year. That wouldn't have been so easy had we not had this, you know, technology. But unfortunately, it also, as you're also probably aware, has some downsides too, and these are quite significant. So things like social media, there's been a lot of research around that affecting our self-esteem. It can create anxiety and depression. It is really a significant area to consider for mental health. And so also I found more recently, and I have a grown-up daughter now, she's 23, also at university. But we've had lots of conversations recently about productivity and lack of motivation. And even though this is all here for us, and, you know, we can see each other, we're still missing that human interaction, and we're missing that sort of feeling of energy that other people can give us by being in a room with us together. So we are missing that. And so it's quite hard sometimes to pick up that. And also that feeling of social isolation, potentially. You might have loads of friends on, you know, your phone and, you know, WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever, but actually you can still feel quite lonely. So there are some issues around this, and that ability to actually switch off and live the rest of your life that you need to live, because the phone being this appendage can sometimes take over, and that feeling cannot always be good. So there are some things that I would probably suggest to think about for people who are feeling slightly addicted. And I do put my own hand up here to being slightly addicted to my phone too, since I had such a terrible one all those years ago. But something when you're trying to concentrate and you're trying to do some work, maybe you're writing an essay, maybe you've got that dissertation coming up soon, is to try and manage those distractions. I now have got, you wouldn't imagine how much technology I've got in this room here. I've got a PC, another laptop, a phone, an iPad, and that's just some of it. All of it can distract me. So it is about sometimes thinking about how you can switch those distractions off and sort of creating some boundaries around your, maybe your work focus time and your kind of non-working time. So, you know, it's okay, you know, you can answer those messages, but maybe find a time when you want to do it all in one go, potentially, because that can be quite helpful. So don't let it go through your whole day, because it can kind of affect your concentration. And you know that every time you send a message, you're probably going to get some dialogue. But when you need to concentrate, you really do. And I'm the same. I have to switch off the alerts. I have to switch stuff off. Otherwise, I just can't get things done. So it's about that, really. And thinking about, you know, if you do carry on using this kind of media, all day long. I've actually had, since the beginning of COVID, I've had 12-hour days, sometimes being on this for a very long time, and it gives me an incredible headache, eye strain. So there are physical aspects to this as well. So I would think about how you do manage that, how you put breaks in. I would think about the other sorts of activities that you might do to refresh yourself. You know, it's an obvious one, but getting outside is a very good idea when you're on this thing all the time. And it really does help you to feel a little bit better. But actually, in terms of managing stress and building that digital resilience, it's good to do an activity that isn't related to this. Now, some people might switch off and do some gaming. So for them, that is switching off from work. Fair enough if that's your thing. But you could go cook something, you could go outside, you could stroke the pet for a while. You know, there are lots of things that will take you away from that. So I would think about, you know, potentially I've been on the kind of digital transitions project as well, where people have said, well, I kind of like using my phone for a bit, but the way that I transition from one state to another is that I have to actually hide the phone somewhere. It has to go, because otherwise I just can't sort of, you know, I can't move on from that, basically. So yeah, I would think about creating those boundaries. Some people like to be very much integrators. They integrate their whole lives with technology, and that, you know, that's them, and they're happy with that and they can cope with that. Other people like to create some compartments around things, and I probably myself fall into that category. I think it's actually better for me to have some categories of when I'm doing certain things and compartments, so that it doesn't all run together, and I can focus also on relationships, family time, and other activities that I want to do. So I would really have a think about technology in your life. The first step actually is becoming aware of what you're doing. And one of the things I often say to people is that, you know, people actually hide some of this stuff. You know, people have been known, I have to include myself here a little bit, off to the toilet, just have a look at the old message or two. You know, you don't think you're doing it, but actually you're still very much engaged in that other world, which isn't here and now. So my big tip for you would be to be present at least some of the time with the people that you're with. And use, you know, you can use techniques such as mindfulness and things like that, but just generally be more aware of how you're using technology, the impact it has both on yourself and also on others. And yeah, I just wanted to finish and say that this last year has been challenging, even for me as a researcher in this area. I've never experienced so much time working away from campus, away from an office. And I've worked for many years. I worked for 15 years in London. I did the commute that Liz was talking about. That is indeed very stressful, so I can recognize that. But for me, as a researcher in this area, it's been quite a lived experience. And I find that working from home or working away in this way in the short term is good. You know, it's quite fun actually, and you can focus and get a bit productive. But actually in this longer term, it's much harder, and you have to work much harder at it to make it work for you as well. So be aware of your own needs. This is a very individual thing in terms of what works for you. There's not one size fits all. You know, what I like to do might be very different to what you like to do, but develop that self-awareness and think about that. So yes, thank you again for having me. This is the book. It's probably back to front, but I've actually written the book.
Christine, I think you've muted there.
So sorry, I'm back. I think that you will see in the future lots of articles about hybrid working and how we're all going to work slightly differently. And I say my book covers these kind of co-working hubs and how we're going to sort of work in communities, practice potentially more locally for some of us. I think things are about to change in the future, so I'm quite excited to see that. So thank you for having me again, and I've enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's very interesting. I think